the unexpected meeting. By the fourth week, the landlord felt like he was walking through fog every single day. His mind was tired, his body was heavy, and his confidence was almost gone. 3 properties stood empty. Bills continued to arrive, and the investigation had not ended. He needed money quickly. After long nights of thinking, he decided to apply for a large bank loan to cover his losses and keep his business alive. He dressed carefully that morning, wearing his best suit and polishing his shoes until they shined. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to see the confident man he used to be, but the reflection showed stress and worry instead. Still, he told himself that money would fix everything. The bank building was tall and modern, with glass walls that reflected the bright sky. As he walked inside, the cool air touched his face, but it did not calm him. He walked to the front desk and gave his name. The receptionist smiled politely and asked him to wait. He sat in a soft chair, holding a thin folder of financial documents. His fingers tapped nervously against the paper. Around him, people walked in and out, some smiling, some serious. For a moment, he closed his eyes and imagined leaving the bank with good news. He imagined signing papers, shaking hands, and walking out with hope restored. Then a voice called his name. "Mr. Harris?" He stood up quickly and turned toward the office door, and that was the moment everything slowed down. Standing in the doorway was a familiar face, the same calm eyes, the same steady posture. The same man who once stood at his front door holding a brown folder. It was the father he had rejected. But this time, the man was not standing outside a house. He was standing inside a bank office, wearing a sharp suit, looking professional and confident. The landlord felt his throat tighten. For a second, he thought he might faint. The father's expression did not show anger or surprise. It was calm, serious, and controlled. "Please come in," the father said in a polite tone. The landlord walked into the office slowly, feeling smaller with each step. He sat down across the desk, avoiding eye contact at first. The office was quiet and clean, with organized papers and a small plant near the window. A nameplate on the desk clearly showed the father's position, senior loan officer. The landlord realized something important in that moment. The man he had judged unfairly was not only qualified to rent his house, he was now qualified to decide his financial future. The father opened the file and began reviewing the documents carefully. Unlike the landlord weeks earlier, he read every page with attention. He asked clear and professional questions about income, expenses, and existing debts. His voice remained steady, respectful, and focused only on facts. The landlord answered quietly, his confidence fading with every number he spoke. The investigation, the empty properties, the lost tenants, everything showed clearly in his financial statements. The father typed something into his computer and studied the screen for a few seconds. The silence felt heavy. Memories rushed through the landlord's mind. The white fence, the door closing, the little girl asking why. He finally looked up and met the father's eyes. There was no anger there. There was no revenge. There was only professionalism. After several minutes, the father closed the file gently. He folded his hands on the desk and spoke calmly. "Based on your current financial situation and the legal matter under review, the bank cannot approve this loan at this time." The words felt like a final blow. The landlord nodded slowly, unable to argue. He understood that this decision was not personal. It was simply the result of his own actions. He stood up to leave, feeling more humbled than ever before. As he reached the door, he paused for a moment. "I suppose actions have consequences," he said quietly, almost to himself. The father looked at him calmly and replied, "Yes, they do." There was no anger in his voice, only truth. The landlord walked out of the bank feeling different than when he had entered. Not angry, not shocked, but aware. For the first time, he truly understood what fairness meant. Outside, the sun was shining brightly. Life continued as normal for everyone else. But inside him, something had shifted. He realized that respect is not about who you allow into a house. It is about how you treat people when they stand at your door. And karma does not shout or fight. It simply waits for the right moment to show you the mirror. The landlord had just looked into that mirror, and what he saw was the result of his own choices. Business starts falling apart. At first, the landlord told himself that everything would return to normal soon. He believed the complaint would fade away like a small storm that passes without damage. But storms do not disappear when the sky still holds heavy clouds. Each morning, he checked his phone, waiting for rental inquiries. Before the complaint, his phone rang often, sometimes 5 or 6 calls a day. Now it stayed silent for hours. When it did ring, people asked strange questions. Is it true there is an investigation? Are you following fair housing rules? The tone of their voices was careful, almost suspicious. He answered politely, trying to sound confident. But confidence is hard to fake when fear sits in your stomach. The house with the white fence remained empty. Its windows were closed, its yard untouched. The bright sign that once felt proud now looked like a reminder of his mistake. Neighbors began talking quietly during evening walks. They did not speak loudly, but the feeling in the air had changed. Some avoided greeting him, others gave short nods without smiles. Trust, once broken, does not repair easily. One afternoon, he received an email from a property website informing him that his listing had been temporarily reviewed due to a discrimination complaint. They asked him to confirm compliance with housing laws. He stared at the screen, realizing that his reputation was spreading beyond his small street. Reputation is like glass, clear and strong when whole, but sharp and dangerous when shattered. 2 tenants from his other rental property called him the same week. One of them, a young nurse, said she had found another place closer to her hospital, but her voice carried something more than distance. The second tenant did not hide his reason. I heard about the complaint, the man said firmly. I do not feel comfortable renting from someone accused of unfair treatment. The landlord tried to argue, tried to defend himself, but words felt weak now. Within days, both tenants submitted their official notice to leave. That meant 3 empty properties instead of 1. 3 empty houses meant 3 lost incomes. The numbers began to worry him deeply. Late at night, he sat alone at his kitchen table with unpaid bills spread in front of him. Electricity, water, maintenance, taxes. He calculated again and again, hoping the math would somehow improve. But numbers do not lie. Meanwhile, across town, the Black family finally received good news. A kind landlord in a different neighborhood approved their application without hesitation. He welcomed them warmly and treated them with respect from the first moment. The house was larger than the white fence house. It had a wide backyard and a big tree perfect for a swing. When their daughter saw her new room, she ran inside and laughed with pure joy. The father stood quietly at the doorway, watching her happiness. He felt something stronger than anger. He felt relief. He realized that sometimes rejection protects you from the wrong place. Back at the white fence house, things continued to fall apart. The investigation moved forward, and local news began covering stories about housing fairness in the city. Though his name was not always mentioned directly, people connected the situation easily. Potential renters avoided his listings. Business partners started keeping distance. One contractor refused to renew a repair agreement, saying he did not want to be involved in controversy. The landlord began to feel isolated. The neighborhood he once tried to protect now felt cold toward him. One evening, as he stepped outside to collect his mail, he saw children playing in the street. For a moment, he imagined what it would have looked like if that little girl had been running there too. The thought made him uncomfortable. He returned inside quickly, shutting the door behind him. Days turned into weeks. The empty houses echoed with silence. The white fence started to look less bright under the sun. Without tenants, even small problems grew bigger. A pipe leaked in one property, causing water damage. A storm knocked down part of a fence in another yard. Each repair meant more money leaving his account. Stress began to show on his face. Dark circles formed under his eyes. His confident walk turned into slow, heavy steps. He had believed that one small decision would change nothing. Instead, that decision had created cracks in every part of his business. And those cracks were spreading. The landlord finally understood something important. When you close a door unfairly, life has a way of closing others back at you. What he once saw as control now felt like loss. What he once called protection now felt like punishment. And this was only the beginning of the lesson that karma was preparing for him. The complaint. The letter did not look dangerous at first glance. It was just a simple white envelope with a government stamp on the corner. But as soon as the landlord opened it and read the first line, his chest felt tight. It clearly stated that a formal complaint had been filed against him for possible housing discrimination. For a few seconds, he just stood there in his hallway, staring at the paper as if it would change if he blinked hard enough. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, trying to calm his rising fear. He walked into his living room and read the letter again, more slowly this time. The words felt heavier now. There would be a review of his rental records, interviews with recent applicants, and a check of his communication history. He told himself it was nothing, just paperwork, just someone being dramatic. But deep inside, he knew exactly which moment had led to this. He remembered the father standing at the door with the brown folder. He remembered the little girl's hopeful eyes. He pushed the memory away quickly. "They cannot prove anything," he whispered under his breath. That evening, he called his friend, the same friend he had laughed with weeks earlier. "There is some complaint against me," he said nervously, trying to sound calm. His friend told him not to worry, saying people complain about everything these days. "Just say the house was already taken," his friend suggested. But the landlord knew it was not that simple anymore. The next week, he received another call, this time from an official investigator. The voice on the phone was polite but serious. They requested copies of all rental applications from the past 3 months. They also asked why the property was still listed online after he had told one applicant it was no longer available. His hands began to sweat as he held the phone. He gave short answers, trying not to reveal too much. After the call ended, he felt something new, something he had not felt before: fear. For the first time, he realized this could damage more than just his reputation, could affect his income, his business, even his future. Across the street, Mrs. Parker noticed less confidence in his movements. He no longer stood proudly in his yard. He avoided eye contact with neighbors. The street felt different now, quieter but heavier. Meanwhile, the investigation quietly moved forward. Officials contacted the Black family and asked about their experience. The father spoke calmly, explaining what happened at the door. He did not exaggerate, he did not show anger. He simply described the change in the landlord's face and the quick rejection. The investigator listened carefully, taking notes. They compared the timeline with the online listing and phone records. The facts began to create a clear picture. Back at the white fence house, 2 tenants who rented other properties from the landlord started asking questions. They had heard rumors about the complaint. One tenant, a young teacher, felt uncomfortable. "If this is true, I do not want to support that kind of behavior," she told her friend. Within days, she gave notice that she would move out at the end of the month. The landlord was shocked. He asked her why, but she simply said she wanted to live somewhere that felt fair and welcoming. That answer stung more than he expected. Then came another problem. A local community group posted a reminder online about fair housing rights. They did not mention his name directly, but people connected the dots quickly. Fewer calls came about the rental. The house with the white fence remained empty. Each empty day meant lost money. Bills continued to arrive in his mailbox. Mortgage payments, maintenance costs, taxes. He began calculating numbers late at night, sitting at his kitchen table with a worried expression. The house he once saw as an investment now felt like a burden. He tried to convince himself that he was the victim. He told himself people were attacking him unfairly. But every time he looked at the front door, he remembered the moment he chose to close it without a fair reason. One afternoon, an official letter arrived again. This one was more serious. It stated that based on initial findings, there was strong evidence of discriminatory practice. There would be penalties and possible legal action if the case moved forward. His vision blurred as he read the final line. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. The street outside remained calm. Children still rode bicycles. Birds still sang in the trees. But inside the white fence house, everything felt unstable. The complaint was no longer just paper. It was a crack in the foundation of his business. And cracks, if ignored, only grow wider with time. The landlord had believed one simple decision would protect his neighborhood. Instead, it was slowly destroying his own security. And the consequences were only beginning. The neighbor who watched. Mrs. Parker had always believed that a quiet street does not mean a blind street. She had lived in that neighborhood long enough to understand that sometimes the most important things happen in silence. From her living room window, she had watched children grow up, families celebrate birthdays, and neighbors help one another during storms. But what she saw that afternoon in front of the white fence house did not feel like the neighborhood she loved. She remembered the little girl's face clearly, the way her eyes shined when she looked at the house. She remembered how the landlord's smile disappeared like someone had turned off a light. That kind of change was not an accident. The next morning, Mrs. Parker sat at her small wooden kitchen table with a cup of tea in her hand, thinking carefully. She was not the type of person who liked drama, but she was also not the type of person who stayed silent when something felt wrong. She opened her old laptop and searched for housing rules in her city. She read slowly, line by line. There were clear laws about fairness, about equal treatment, about not rejecting someone because of race. Her heart beat a little faster as she realized the seriousness of what she had seen. Still, she knew she needed to be sure, so she decided to test the truth with her own eyes. That afternoon, she changed into a clean blue dress and walked across the street. She rang the landlord's doorbell with calm confidence. When he opened the door, his face showed surprise, but he quickly smiled. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Parker," he said politely. "I was wondering about the house," she replied gently. "It is still available, right?" "Yes, of course," he answered quickly, too quickly. She noticed how easily the words came out this time. She glanced toward the yard, where the "For Rent" sign still stood proudly in place. "Strange," she said softly. "I thought you rented it yesterday." The landlord hesitated just long enough to reveal his lie. No, that deal did not work out," he explained, forcing a small laugh. Mrs. Parker smiled politely and nodded, but inside her chest, something felt heavy. She thanked him and walked back home slowly. From her porch, she looked at the quiet street again. Everything appeared normal, but now she saw it differently. That evening, she made another phone call. This time not just for information, but to file a concern. She explained what she had witnessed, carefully describing the timeline, the family, the sudden rejection, and the sign that never left the yard. The person on the other end listened closely and took notes. They thanked her for speaking up and said they would look into it. After hanging up, Mrs. Parker sat in silence, wondering what would happen next. Meanwhile, the landlord continued his daily routine, unaware of the storm slowly building around him. He posted new photos of the house online, describing it as perfect for the right family. He believed he was in control, but control can disappear quickly when truth begins to move. A few days later, a young couple arrived to see the house. They were friendly and cheerful, and the landlord welcomed them warmly inside. Mrs. Parker watched again from her window. This time, she noticed how wide the landlord smiled, how long he showed them the rooms, how comfortable he looked. It confirmed everything in her heart. Word slowly began to spread through small conversations, quiet whispers between neighbors, not loud accusations but simple questions. "Did you hear what happened? Is it true?" People began looking at the white fence house differently. It no longer felt like a symbol of beauty. It felt like a symbol of something hidden. Meanwhile, the black family continued searching for a home, unaware that someone was standing up for them behind the scenes. The father kept checking his phone for calls from landlords. The mother kept encouraging him. telling him not to lose hope. Their daughter kept drawing pictures of houses with white fences, dreaming of a yard to play in. 1 week later, the landlord received an official letter in his mailbox. It had a government seal on the front. His hands felt cold as he opened it. Inside, the letter stated that a complaint had been filed regarding possible discrimination practices. His heart dropped into his stomach. He read the letter again and again, hoping he misunderstood it, but the words were clear. An investigation would begin. He looked out the window toward Mrs. Parker's house, unaware that the quiet woman across the street had chosen courage over silence. Sometimes justice does not shout. Sometimes it watches, waits, and moves quietly, and the landlord was about to learn that even the calmest streets can carry powerful consequences. The real reason. When the door closed behind them, the sound stayed in the father's mind like an echo that would not stop. He walked back to the car with slow steps, trying to keep his face calm for his daughter. Inside, his thoughts were loud and painful. He had worked hard all his life, stayed honest, paid taxes, respected people, and believed that effort always brought results. Yet that door had closed without even giving him a chance. The mother sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the white fence growing smaller as they drove away. She had seen that look before, the look that said more than words ever could. It was not about papers, money, or background checks. It was about something else, something unfair and ugly. In the back seat, their little daughter hugged her small teddy bear and whispered, "I like that house." Her simple words felt heavier than anything else. The father forced a soft smile and said, "We will find a better one, I promise." But deep inside, he felt tired, not just from searching for houses, but from proving himself again and again. Meanwhile, back at the white fence house, the landlord locked the door and walked to his kitchen. He placed the brown folder on the counter without looking at it again. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hand was slightly shaking. For a moment, he stood there in silence. Then his phone rang. It was his friend from the next neighborhood. "How is the rental going?" the friend asked casually. The landlord let out a small laugh and said, "I just avoided a problem." "What do you mean?" "I mean I know who fits here and who does not," he replied, lowering his voice slightly. His friend did not question him. They both understood what he was saying without saying it directly. After ending the call, the landlord looked out the window toward the street. Everything looked peaceful, clean houses, quiet road, children riding bicycles. He believed he was protecting something, protecting the image of his neighborhood. He told himself he had done nothing wrong, but there was a small, uncomfortable feeling inside him, a tiny voice asking if he had judged too quickly. He ignored that voice. Across the street, behind thin curtains, Mrs. Parker had seen everything. She was an elderly woman who had lived in that neighborhood for over 30 years. She believed in fairness and kindness. She had seen many families move in and out over the years, different backgrounds, different stories. From her window, she had noticed the landlord's smile disappear when he opened the door. She had noticed how quickly he ended the conversation. It did not look right. Later that evening, she stepped outside to water her plants. The "For Rent" sign was still clearly in the yard, untouched. She looked at it carefully and felt something was not honest. The next morning, she decided to test something. She walked across the street and rang the landlord's doorbell. When he opened the door, his face looked relaxed and friendly. "Good morning," she said kindly. "I heard your house is for rent." "Yes, it is," he replied immediately with a smile. She raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "Oh, I thought you rented it yesterday." The landlord hesitated for half a second, then quickly said, "No, the deal fell through." Mrs. Parker nodded slowly, but inside she felt sure now. She thanked him and walked back home, her mind working carefully. That afternoon, she made a quiet phone call to a local housing office, asking about discrimination rules and tenant rights. She did not mention names yet, but she asked many questions. The answers she received made her heart heavy. Meanwhile, the Black family continued their search. They visited 2 more houses that week. One was too small, the other too expensive. Each time, the father showed the same brown folder, spoke politely, and hoped for fairness. Each night, they returned to their small hotel room. The daughter asked again and again, "When will we have a home?" The mother hugged her and said, "Soon," even when she was not sure. But something had changed inside the father. He was no longer just searching for a house. He was searching for dignity, respect, and a place where his daughter would feel safe and welcomed. Back at the white fence house, the landlord started to notice fewer phone calls about the rental. He posted the listing online again, but interest seemed slower than before. He did not know that in small neighborhoods, news sometimes travels quietly, and sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest consequences. What he thought was a simple decision was about to grow into something much larger. Because when unfairness hides behind polite words, truth often finds its way into the light. The house with the white fence. On a quiet street in a peaceful neighborhood, there stood a beautiful house with a bright white fence around it. The fence was clean and fresh, and the small front yard had green grass that looked soft like a carpet. Two tall trees stood near the gate, giving cool shade to the walkway. The house had wide windows that shined in the afternoon sun, and light curtains moved gently inside. It looked like the kind of house where happy memories are made. Many people had stopped to look at it during the week, because a clear sign in the yard said, "For rent." It was the kind of home that gave hope to anyone searching for a new beginning. That same afternoon, a car slowly turned onto the street and stopped in front of the house. Inside the car was a small black family, a father, a mother, and their little daughter. They had just moved to the city a few weeks ago, and they were still staying in a small hotel room. They were tired of living out of suitcases, tired of eating simple food, and tired of waiting for a place to truly call home. The father stepped out of the car first, holding a brown folder tightly in his hand. Inside that folder were all the documents any landlord would want to see: proof of his steady job, proof of income, clean records, and strong references. He had worked hard for many years, saving money and building a stable life for his family. He believed today would finally be the day their search would end. The mother stepped out next, holding her daughter's hand gently. The little girl looked at the house with wide eyes full of excitement. "Mommy, is this going to be our new home?" she asked softly. Her voice carried both hope and fear, because she had asked the same question before, and the answer had always been uncertain. The mother forced a smile and said, "Maybe, sweetheart. Let's see." The father walked up to the white fence and opened the small gate, which made a soft creaking sound. They walked together toward the front door, their steps slow but hopeful. The father rang the doorbell, and the sound echoed inside the house. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the door slowly opened. A middle-aged man stood there, wearing a neat shirt and glasses. He was the landlord. At first, he gave a polite smile, the kind of smile people give when they expect something simple and easy. But when his eyes moved from the father to the mother and then to the little girl, his smile slowly faded. Something changed in his expression. The warmth in his face disappeared, replaced by a cold and distant look. The father noticed it immediately, but he stayed calm. He greeted the landlord politely and handed him the folder with all the papers. The landlord took the folder but did not invite them inside. He flipped through the pages quickly, barely reading anything carefully. The father explained his job and his steady income, speaking clearly and respectfully. The mother stood quietly beside him, holding her daughter's hand tighter now. The little girl looked at the house behind the landlord and imagined where her toys would go. She imagined her own small bedroom with pink walls and a soft bed near the window. She imagined running in the yard under the tall trees. The landlord closed the folder slowly. He did not ask many questions. He did not smile again. Instead, he looked past them for a moment, as if thinking about something else. Then he cleared his throat and said, "I'm sorry. The house is no longer available." The words felt heavy in the air. The father blinked in confusion, because the "for rent" sign was still clearly standing in the yard. He gently asked, "Oh, it was rented already?" The landlord nodded quickly and said, "Yes, Just this morning. But something in his voice did not sound honest. The mother looked back at the sign and then at her husband. She understood without needing to say anything. The father felt a deep pain in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you for your time," he said politely. The landlord gave a short nod and slowly closed the door. The sound of the door shutting felt louder than it should have been. For a few seconds, the family just stood there in silence outside the white fence house. The little girl looked up at her father and asked in a small voice, "Daddy, why didn't he let us see inside?" The father swallowed hard, searching for the right words. He did not want to explain hate to a child who still believed the world was kind. He gently knelt down and smiled at her, even though his heart was breaking. "It's okay," he said softly. "This one just wasn't meant for us." They walked back to their car slowly, each step heavier than before. As they drove away, the white fence grew smaller in the distance. But what the landlord did not know was that someone across the street had seen everything. And the story of that house was far from over